before we dive into today's mystery, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps us keep uncovering the unknown. Now, let's begin. The quiet town of Beulah, Alabama, had always been a peaceful place, especially during the holiday season. Christmas lights adorned the streets, and families gathered to celebrate with warmth and cheer. But on the night of December 24th, 2024, the festive atmosphere was shattered by a crime so brutal that it left the entire town reeling in shock. It was around 8:30 p.m. when Lee County Sheriff's deputies received a chilling 911 call. A woman's voice trembled on the other end, reporting gunshots and screaming from her neighbor's house. Within minutes, multiple patrol cars sped through the dimly lit roads, their sirens piercing the holiday air. The address provided belonged to a small, single-story home nestled near a wooded area, a home where two young women, Kayden Lynch and Madison Daly, lived. Beulah is a small, unincorporated community in Lee County, Alabama, with a population just shy of 6,000. It's the kind of town where everyone knows each other, where neighbors leave their doors unlocked, and where crime is almost unheard of. Located near the Georgia border, Beulah is home to sprawling farmlands, dense pine forests, and quiet, winding roads. Kayden and Madison have been living together in a modest house on a quiet street lined with similar single-story homes. The girls had only moved in a year prior, eager to embrace their newfound independence. Their home sat at the edge of a wooded lot, where the occasional deer could be seen grazing in the backyard. That night, however, the only sound coming from the house was the echo of gunfire. Kayden Lynch was known for her bright smile and love of animals. She had just turned 19 and worked part-time at a local veterinary clinic while attending community college. Her dream was to become a wildlife rehabilitation specialist. She had a gentle, caring nature that made her well-loved by friends and family alike. Madison Daly, 18, was the more outgoing of the two. She was a star volleyball player at Beulah High School and had recently been accepted into Auburn University, where she planned to major in sports management. Madison was the kind of person who lit up a room with her energy, always cracking jokes and making people feel at ease. Despite their different personalities, Kayden and Madison were inseparable. Their parents had married 5 years earlier, blending their families into one. Though not biological sisters, they treated each other like blood, sharing everything, from clothes to secrets. Their bond made the tragedy all the more heartbreaking. When authorities arrived at the house that night, they found the front door ajar. Inside, the holiday decorations were still intact. Stockings hung by the fireplace, a small Christmas tree in the corner, and wrapped presents under its twinkling lights. But the festive scene was overshadowed by something far more gruesome. Kayden and Madison's bodies were found in the living room, lying just feet apart. Madison had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. Kayden had been struck 3 times, with one bullet lodging in her spine. Blood pooled beneath them, staining the beige carpet. The gunfire had been so loud that it had awakened neighbors, prompting the desperate 911 call. The Lee County Coroner's Office later confirmed the official cause of death for both victims as multiple gunshot wounds. Based on forensic evidence, Kayden had been shot first, possibly as she attempted to flee. The trajectory of the bullets suggested she had turned away in an effort to escape before collapsing near the couch. Madison had been shot at close range, execution style, indicating a more deliberate and personal attack. The presence of shell casings near the bodies suggested that the killer had fired the shots in quick succession, leaving no chance for the girls to defend themselves. Investigators found no signs of forced entry, which raised a chilling possibility. The girls may have known their killer. Authorities spent hours processing the crime scene. The house itself showed no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. Just the eerie stillness of interrupted life. Their phones remained on the coffee table, untouched, as if they had been caught off guard. The television was still playing, frozen on the pause screen of a Christmas movie. Detectives worked to reconstruct the girls' final moments. Madison's last known activity had been a Snapchat post at 8:12 p.m., showing her curled up on a couch with a cup of hot cocoa. Just minutes later, the horrific attack occurred. Police also noticed something unusual. A side door leading to the backyard was left slightly open. It had rained earlier in the evening, and fresh muddy footprints trailed from the door into the house. Whoever had entered had done so quietly, avoiding the main entrance. Neighbors reported seeing a dark figure moving quickly from the house just before sirens arrived. Surveillance footage from a nearby property captured a shadowy silhouette slipping through the woods, disappearing into the night. By Christmas morning, news of the brutal double homicide had spread throughout Beulah. Friends and classmates of the victims gathered outside their home, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Grief hung over the town like a heavy fog, as people struggled to understand how such a horrific crime could happen in their peaceful community. The investigation intensified. Detectives worked tirelessly, interviewing family, friends, and neighbors. The question remained, who would want Kayden and Madison dead? And why had their lives been taken so violently, on a night meant for joy and celebration? As authorities pieced together evidence, one name kept surfacing, a young man who lived just a few houses away, a neighbor, someone the girls knew. And soon, a horrifying truth would emerge. As the sun rose over Beulah on Christmas morning, the small town awoke to the tragic news of Kayden Lynch and Madison Daly's murders. The quiet, tight-knit community, where violent crime was rare, now had 2 young lives stolen in an execution-style killing. Detectives worked through the night, combing the crime scene for any lead. By midday, they had one, a name that had surfaced repeatedly during interviews, Jalen Holmes. Holmes was 18 years old, a high school dropout who lived just 3 houses down from Kayden and Madison. He was well known in the neighborhood, but not necessarily well-liked. Teachers at Beulah High remembered him as a troubled student, prone to violent outbursts. He had a history of disciplinary issues and had once been suspended for bringing a knife to school. His family had moved to Beulah 5 years ago, but Jalen never seemed to fit in. He had few close friends and spent most of his time alone. Some neighbors claimed he had a fixation on Madison, often staring at her from his front porch whenever she walked by. Others recalled seeing him hanging around the girl's house, sometimes uninvited. What investigators learned next sent a chill down their spines. Jalen had been seen near Kayden and Madison's house on the night of the murders. Jalen lived in a rundown house with a single mother, Jalen Holmes, a woman who had been struggling to keep her son out of trouble for years. She had filed several police reports over the past 2 years, citing Jalen's aggressive behavior and frequent disappearances at night. Neighbors recalled seeing Jalen loitering outside Kayden and Madison's home just hours before the murders. One witness, an elderly woman who lived across the street, reported that around 7:45 p.m., she had spotted Jalen standing near the tree line behind the girl's house, watching their windows. Another neighbor, a teenage boy who had attended school with Jalen, mentioned that Jalen often spoke about getting what he deserved from Madison. Some classmates recalled unsettling incidents where Jalen would follow Madison in the hallways or try to talk to her despite her visible discomfort. She had once confided in a friend that Jalen made her feel uneasy, but had never reported him to the authorities. Investigators quickly realized this wasn't a random act of violence. It was premeditated. Ballistic analysis confirmed that the murder weapon was a 9mm handgun. The bullets retrieved from Kayden and Madison's bodies all matched the same firearm. But where did Jalen get a gun? Detectives interviewed his mother, who revealed something disturbing. Jalen had stolen her handgun the night before the murders. Lorraine kept a registered 9mm in her bedroom for self-defense. She had reported it missing earlier that day, but hadn't suspected her son at the time. "I knew he was angry," she later told investigators. "But I never thought, never my worst nightmares, he'd do something like this." Security footage from a nearby gas station showed Jalen purchasing gloves and a ski mask on the afternoon of December 24th. Investigators theorized that he had been planning the attack for days, if not weeks. Jalen had a weapon. He had a motive. And now, the evidence against him was piling up. The discovery of the stolen gun solidified Jalen's connection to the crime. Detectives obtained a warrant to search his house, hoping to find further evidence linking him to the murders. Inside Jalen's bedroom, investigators found a black hoodie and gloves, still damp from the previous night's rain, a journal with disturbing entries, detailing his frustration over being ignored and disrespected, a printout of Madison's class schedule from her high school, Google searches related to how to remove fingerprints from a gun and how to shoot accurately. The most damning discovery, however, was the gun itself. Hidden beneath his mattress, the 9mm handgun was found wrapped in a towel, with one bullet still in the chamber. Jalen was no criminal mastermind. His plan had holes from the start, and his panic after the crime led him to make mistakes, leaving footprints, failing to dispose of the weapon, and underestimating how quickly law enforcement would connect the dots. With irrefutable evidence in hand, detectives prepared to make an arrest. The final piece of the puzzle came from Jalen's mother, Lorraine. She tearfully recounted what had happened just hours before the murders. On December 24th, around 6:30 p.m., Jalen had come home agitated. His mother had tried to calm him down, but something in his demeanor was different that night. When she asked him about his plans for the evening, he snapped, shoving her against the wall and storming into her bedroom. That's when he took the gun. Lorraine had threatened to call the police, but Jalen turned on her, grabbing her by the throat and warning her to stay out of his way. Shaken, she locked herself in her room and waited until she heard the front door slam shut. That was the last time she saw her son before the murders. Lorraine later told detectives, "I should have called the cops right then. Maybe they could have stopped him." Her voice broke. Maybe my son wouldn't have turned into a killer. By the afternoon of December 25th, Christmas Day, authorities had everything they needed. A SWAT team surrounded Jalen's house, guns drawn, as officers banged on the front door. Jalen didn't resist. When the door opened, he stood in the living room with his hands raised, as if he'd been expecting them. His face was eerily blank. The officers cuffed him without incident, reading him his rights. As they led him outside, neighbors watched in stunned silence. The same boy they had seen riding his bike as a child, the same kid who had once played basketball in the driveway, was now being arrested for the cold-blooded murder of 2 young women. Jalen was charged with capital murder, and as he was taken into custody, he muttered only 4 chilling words. "They should have picked me." No one knew exactly what he meant. At least, not yet. Jalen Deshaun Holmes sat in an interrogation room at the Lee County Sheriff's Office just hours after his arrest. He was eerily calm. The officers expected some level of emotion, remorse, anger, fear, but Jalen showed none. He simply stared at the table, his hands shackled, his expression unreadable. Detectives pressed him for a motive. Why had he walked into Kayden and Madison's home on Christmas Eve and executed them? But Jalen wasn't interested in talking. When asked directly, he smirked and muttered, "You already know." But the truth was they didn't. The evidence was overwhelming, but nothing explained why Jalen had targeted them in such a brutal manner. Was this an obsession with Madison? A rejection that boiled into rage? A crime of opportunity? Or something deeper? Detectives turned to Jalen's personal life for answers. They pored over his social media, searching for any sign of his motives. Then they found something chilling. On December 22nd, just 2 days before the murders, Jalen had posted a cryptic message on a private online forum. "It's funny how people treat you like you don't exist, until you make them remember." The post was accompanied by a grainy photo of Madison at a local gym. She hadn't noticed she was being watched. This wasn't just an attack. It was a fixation turned deadly. Jalen had nowhere to run after murders. His careless mistakes, the muddy footprints, the stolen gun, the gas station footage, left police with an easy trail to follow. Within 18 hours of the crime, law enforcement had everything they needed. When Jalen was arrested, he didn't resist. He didn't even ask why he was being taken in. His lack of reaction disturbed the officers. No fear, no surprise, no denial. He simply let them cuff him and walked out of his house without a word. During his interrogation, Jalen refused to show any remorse. When asked if he regretted what he did, he scoffed. "What's the point of regret? They're dead." The coldness in his voice sent shivers down the detectives' spines. Jalen knew exactly what he had done, and he didn't care. On December 26, 2024, just 2 days after the murders, Lee County District Attorney's Office formally charged Jalen Deshaun Holmes with 2 counts of capital murder, 1 for each victim, burglary in the first degree, for unlawfully entering the victim's home with intent to commit a crime. Possession of a stolen firearm, his mother's 9mm handgun. Because capital murder is the most serious charge under Alabama law, Jalen faced only 2 possible sentences: life in prison without parole, the death penalty. Given the brutality of the crime, the prosecution immediately signaled their intent to seek the death penalty. Jalen was transferred to the Lee County Detention Center, where he was held without bail. His court date was set for early 2025, but the legal process would take months, possibly years, to reach a final verdict. For now, Beulah could only wait for justice. The news of Kayden and Madison's deaths spread like wildfire across Alabama. In a town where violent crime was almost unheard of, the idea that 2 young women had been murdered in their own home, on Christmas Eve, no less, was unthinkable. The high school they had once attended held a candlelight vigil the day after Christmas. Hundreds of people showed up, friends, teachers, neighbors, even strangers who had only heard about the tragedy from the news. Madison's volleyball coach spoke through tears. She was supposed to go to Auburn next year. She had dreams. She had plans. Kayden's boss at the veterinary clinic struggled to find words. She had the kindest heart of anyone I ever met. At the crime scene, the girl's house became a makeshift memorial. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes covered the front porch. A banner stretched across the fence, reading, "Forever in our hearts, Kayden and Madison." But underneath the grief, anger was brewing. Many in the community blamed Jalen's mother for not reporting her son's dangerous behavior earlier. Others demanded harsher laws to prevent people like Jalen from accessing weapons. And then there were those who asked the hardest question of all. Could this have been prevented? Even with Jalen in custody, the investigation wasn't over. Detectives wanted to ensure they had an airtight case, one that would leave no room for doubt in court. Forensic teams continued combing through evidence, looking for additional proof of Jalen's premeditation, potential accomplices, or enablers, a full psychological profile to understand his state of mind. They examined Jalen's phone records and discovered dozens of deleted messages. With the help of digital forensics, they were able to recover some of them, revealing even more disturbing insights. One message, sent to a former classmate 2 weeks before the murders, read, "I could kill someone and feel nothing. Want to bet?" Another, sent the day before the murders, said, "Tomorrow is the day. I'm done waiting." Detectives also uncovered Google searches from Jalen's phone. How loud is a gunshot in a house? Do police check security cameras after a murder? How to disappear after killing someone? Each discovery painted a clearer picture. Jalen had planned this for weeks. There was no way he could claim it was a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was cold, calculated murder. By February 2025, Beulah, Alabama, had turned into a media circus. News vans lined the streets outside the Lee County Courthouse, where the trial of Jalen Holmes was set to begin. True crime enthusiasts, journalists, and members of the local community packed the courtroom to witness the case unfold. Jalen, now 19 years old, sat at the defense table, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit. He was thinner than before, his face hollow, but his demeanor remained the same, cold, detached, and emotionless. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Mark Ledbetter, wasted no time in laying out their case. They sought the death penalty. This was a calculated, premeditated act of pure evil, Ledbetter declared in his opening statement. The defendant stalked, planned, and executed 2 innocent young women. On Christmas Eve, no less. There is no justification, no excuse. Justice demands the ultimate sentence. The defense, led by attorney Robert Callahan, tried to argue that Jalen suffered from severe mental illness and should not face the death penalty. Jalen Holmes is not a monster, Callahan insisted. He is a young man who has suffered years of neglect, untreated mental health disorders, and psychological trauma. He needs help, not execution. But the prosecution came prepared. They presented damning evidence. Jalen's journal entries, where he detailed his obsession with Madison, his Google searches, which proved he planned the killings weeks in advance, security footage showing him purchasing gloves and a ski mask before the murders, forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene, including footprints and DNA. Then came the most chilling piece of evidence, a voice recording from Madison's phone. Unbeknownst to Jalen, Madison had started recording minutes before she died. The courtroom went silent as the audio played. Madison's voice trembled as she begged, "Jalen, please don't do this." Then 2 gunshots rang out. Jalen showed no emotion as the recording ended. The jury stared at him in horror. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case was handed to the jury. The deliberations lasted only 6 hours, a clear sign that their decision was nearly unanimous. On March 15th, 2025, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty of capital murder, 2 counts. Guilty of first-degree burglary. Guilty of possession of a stolen firearm. The judge, Honorable Stephen McAllister, asked Jalen to rise. Jalen Deshaun Holmes, the jury has found you guilty. You've been convicted of 2 brutal murders, crimes that have devastated this community. Justice will now be served. Jalen showed no reaction. No tears, no anger, just the same empty stare. But the biggest decision was still ahead. Would he get life in prison, or the death penalty? On April 5th, 2025, the judge handed down the final sentence. The courtroom was packed, with Kayden's and Madison's families seated in the front row, clutching hands, waiting for justice. This crime was ruthless. You took 2 innocent lives with no remorse. You planned, you executed, and you showed the court no signs of regret. The law in Alabama is clear for cases such as this. A deep breath, a long pause. I hereby sentence you, Jalen Deshaun Holmes, to death by lethal injection. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kayden's mother burst into tears, sobbing into her hands. Madison's father nodded solemnly, as if he'd been waiting to hear those words for months. Jalen blinked but remained silent. No plea for mercy, no breakdown, just cold acceptance of his fate. As officers escorted him out of the courtroom, he finally spoke. A reporter later recounted his words. Guess I finally matter now. After the trial, Kayden and Madison's families stood before a crowd of reporters outside the courthouse. The pain on their faces was evident. Justice had been served, but their daughters were still gone. Kayden's mother, Angela Lynch, wiped away tears as she spoke. No mother should have to bury her child. No mother should have to spend Christmas staring at an empty chair. My daughter was my world, and now she's gone. Madison's father, Greg Daly, clenched his jaw as he spoke. This town is broken. Our family is broken. But we are relieved that this monster will never hurt anyone again. But it was Madison's little sister, 14-year-old Emily, who left the crowd in stunned silence. I don't care about Jalen Holmes. He's dead to me. I just want my sister back. Her words broke the hearts of everyone watching. No sentence, no punishment could ever heal their pain. Even months after the trial, the town of Beulah, Alabama, would never be the same. Kayden and Madison's home was eventually sold, but no one wanted to move in. It remained vacant, a silent reminder of the horror that had taken place there. At Beulah High School, a memorial was set up for the girls. 2 empty chairs in the front row of the gym, where Madison once played volleyball and Kayden once cheered for her. Jalen Deshaun Holmes was transferred to Holman Correctional Facility, Alabama's death row prison. He spent his days in solitary confinement, awaiting execution. He had no visitors, no appeals, no remorse. By June 2025, Beulah tried to move forward. But for those who had known and loved Kayden and Madison, the wounds would never fully heal. And every Christmas Eve, as families gathered around their trees, 2 homes in Beulah would remain dark, forever missing 2 bright souls who should have been there. Holmes was arrested on December 24th, 2024, and charged with capital murder involving 2 or more victims. He is currently held without bond in the Lee County Jail. The investigation is ongoing, and no trial date has been set at this time. The tragedy in Beulah wasn't just about Jalen Holmes. It was about 2 young women whose futures were stolen, about families left shattered, about a town that would forever carry the weight of what happened that Christmas Eve. Because no matter how many years passed, how many trials were held, or how many sentences were carried out, The chairs at the dinner table would still be empty. The gifts under the tree would still be unopened. And two bright souls would still be gone. Forever.